Okay, I know I say every design is my favorite, but this one really is my favorite. Hey everybody, Tom the Colourblind Quilter here, and you are watching This Is How You Quilt It, where we are on Unlucky for Some video number 13, which is the Zigzag Crosshatch. Now, I do love this design. I know I've said it several times now, but I really do love this design. It's very modern, but it adds amazing texture, especially to white spaces in quilts. It does look like, though, it's a bit faffy and it might take a bit of prep, but actually it's not as bad as you might think. But in my opinion, the results are well worth the time spent doing it. So the difficulty rating, I'm giving this a 3 out of 5. I think a confident beginner could do this quite easily without any problems. And on the cuddle rating, this is fairly soft at the size I quilted, so I'm giving this a 2 out of 5. You can, of course, bump that up by making these lines closer together with a denser grid, or you can space them further apart to get a fluffier quilt. So 2 out of 5, middle of the ground, because this is quite nice and easy to crumple. And now it needs ironed. So let's not waste any more time, let's get straight into the preparation steps. So on the very top of your block, line your ruler up just off the edge of the block. So there's just a little bit of block showing. I want check marks 2 inches apart. So I'm making sure that the 10-inch is lined up with this edge and the end of my ruler is lined up with this edge. So I know that I'm nice and straight. And I'm just going to put a check mark, check mark, check mark, and a check mark. And then I'm just going to turn around and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. With your ruler, find the 1/4 inch line, it's this big line here, and we are going to line it up with the check mark. We're going to keep the ruler lined up here on 2 1/4, and when we're happy, we're going to mark a line. Then same thing over here, line up the 1/4 inch line on your ruler with a check mark, make sure your ruler is straight and draw a line, and my pencil just broke. You want to repeat that. Now flip it round 180 degrees. So what I like to do is find a 1/2 inch line this time on my ruler, which is this edge here. Line up with the line that I drew and mark my line. You can see the check marks here in the middle and I've got lines either a 1/4 inch either side. Show you that again. Here's the line that I drew. 1/2 inch line on my ruler, line it up. Once I'm happy that it's nice and straight, mark my line. Okay, so you can see we've got 4 lots of 2 lines with a check mark in the middle. You're going to do the same thing in the opposite direction. So you can see this looks a bit like tartan lines if you remember back at that design. So we're going to be drawing lines across these into these spaces, and we're going to use these corners to intersect our lines so that we know where we're going. So I want all my lines to be going this way to start, but not all of them are going to intersect to the same corner. So let's watch and let's do this. So this first one, we are going to draw from this corner to this first corner. And because it's the edge, I'm going to position my ruler and then I'm going to draw up. This line is going to intersect here. So we're going to draw this one next. So again, we're going to line up the corner of the intersection with the ruler, line up to the intersection on the edge, draw our line. Because this one's going that way, it means that one has to go this angle. And that means it has to come down to here, which means that this one has to come down to this point here in order for the lines to meet. So you can see now why we do this a little bit at a time, because it's very easy to get mixed up. Essentially, you're drawing corner to corner across a rectangle. You see how these meet now? Start to get the idea. So this time this one goes this way, so it means that it only needs to go to that corner to keep us right. So we can draw this one here, and then we can draw this one to here. Next one, this line has to come down to this corner, so it means that that one has to intersect all the way down to this point. See, there? And then finalize, we finalize even this line. And then from here, we're going to take this line and just finish it off to the edge. So we've got our first line. So all these lines are going this way. All these lines are going to go that way. So this line here has to go diagonally across to this point. So it means that this line has to go all the way over there. So we draw this one first, and then we draw this one next. This line is going to go down to this point, which means this one only has to go to the first set of line. Now, I know this might seem confusing. I promise it's not. It's just looking at where the lines land so you can make sure that you get the line to the right place. This line is going to have to come down to this point here, which means this one's going to have to intersect that way. So we're going to draw and keep going, filling in these lines. And then this one is going to just finish all the way down to the bottom of the block, like so. See how we've got the zigzag, and then we just have to repeat that for these ones, and it's not difficult. And if you can plan ahead, then you can absolutely do this without doing it one way then another way. My brain just can't quite work like that. This one's going to intersect down here, so this means this line goes this way, this line goes this way. Next one, this one is going that direction, so it's going to intersect here, which means this comes all the way down. This line, again, is going to need to come all the way down here. So you see, once you get into the swing of this, it gets much easier. This line is coming down this way, which means this line is going this way, so it has to come down to this point here. So you see, as you get into the routine of this, it gets much quicker. This line is coming down this way, which means that line only needs to intersect to this one. This line is going this way, which means it's coming, this one needs to come down here because this line is going this way. So then this one, like that, and then this is going off the edge. This line is going this way, which means it's intersecting with this one. This line is going that way, which means it intersects here. So this drop to there, drop down to there. This line is coming down to this second point here because this line is going to there. And then look, all these lines now go all the way to the bottom. Okay, so you're like, oh, no, Tom, no, that's too much. I don't want to do this one. No, thank you. But please do. That's such a nice design. And when you see this stitched out, you'll see how lovely this really is. I think it's worth the effort. So take your time, plan your way through, erase any mistakes if you go to the wrong place, and then it doesn't take too long at all. So that was the prep. Dead simple, wasn't it? It's a bit like doing the prep for the zigzag matchsticks, except instead of just doing them in one direction, we do them in the opposite direction as well. So now let's show you how to sew this. Right, so pick a line anywhere to start, line up the needle with the edge, and just sew down until you reach an intersection. Take your time as you get to the intersection. You might need to advance a stitch at a time. Once you're happy, if you've got this hopping feature on your sewing machine, it's very helpful because you can just turn, pivot. And then once you're happy, you're all lined up, sew down to your next intersection. And then stop once you're in place. And then just keep sewing all the way down, stopping as you get to the intersections and pivoting. Now, a word of caution here. You really do want these intersections to be perfect because this is where the crosshatch design comes in. Because these are straight lines, it can be quite noticeable if it's not quite 100%. So do take your time to get right into that corner and make sure that the sewing machine is in the right spot before you move on. But it doesn't take any time at all, it's easy. It's just straight lines with some pivoting, okay? So you can see how that works down there nicely. So we're going to continue sewing the rest of these lines, and I'm going to tell you about my sewing machine setup. I am using a straight stitch plate on my sewing machine so that no corners or edges get sucked into the gap, hopefully. I'm using a walking foot, which is essential for even feeding of top and bottom layers at the same time. I am using Gutermann 50 weight 100% cotton thread in a white colour, and that's so that you can see my stitches on camera. I probably wouldn't pick white if I was doing this as a quilt, but it just makes it easier for you to see what I'm doing as I work on this block. My stitch length is set to 2.5, and I'm using just a normal 80-12 needle. This is such a fun design. I love how this turns out. It creates such a nice texture on quilts. And it's so easy to sew. I mean, it literally is just straight lines sewing down to a pivot point. That's it. There's no curved lines here. There's no weird angles to worry about. It's just straight lines all the way down. Now I use my fingers in a triangle shape to support the block. I'm not pushing through with my hands. I'm just allowing the sewing machine to pull the fabric through. I'm just manipulating it and guiding it, trying to keep it straight. Sometimes you might find that the sewing machine has this kind of movement as it goes through and you end up with some weird looking stitching. So doing this helps to try and stabilize that. Be careful not to be pressing too hard though, because you might end up putting tension and pressure on your wrist that's uncomfortable. Quilting gloves as well will really help you to adjust this and move it. It's so easy to manipulate with the rubber tips. Sometimes I find if I don't use these, my fingers slip over the surface of the fabric as opposed to gripping it. So just bear that in mind. Although it's not too bad for a small block like this. and then sew off to the edge. You'll notice I don't use a securing function thread here. I am going to zigzag the edge of these blocks. Now we're going to turn around. So we start again lining up an edge, and then we're going to work our way down this line. Now this is where we need precision. We're taking it nice and easy as we approach this intersection. Stitch at a time, we don't want to overshoot this. Come on, sewing machine, come on. Perfect, okay. And then pivot. And then sew down and take your time as we approach the line. We want to intersect perfect. And then we just keep going down. Now this is really important because we spent all the time making sure that these lines lined up and gave us the crosshatch effect. So we've got to make sure that we do this when we're sewing, that we get these lines to line up perfectly and intersect perfectly. Don't get me wrong, if it's not 100%, then it's not going to be the end of the world. But we want these nice sharp points. See, these are really good, really sharp. So then we just need to repeat that 3 more times. And this is one of these designs that I do genuinely take my time on when I'm coming to these corners like this, because I really do want this to be crisp. It's well worth this little bit of effort to get a really nice looking effect. Oh, it's coming together nicely. Last little bit. That was so quick and so simple to sew. Look at that. How amazing is that? I absolutely love this design. These diamonds, squares on points, that just came from zigzag lines. It amazes me every time I do this design. So it's dead simple. So the only things we really got to watch for is just these intersections. We want these intersections to be crisp so that we get these lovely effects. But yeah, that's really dead simple to do. Piece of cake. So that was how to sew it. Dead simple, dead easy. And as you get into the routine of pivoting and working your way down, you get into kind of routine and it becomes quicker and quicker to sew this. But now let's talk about a few things to watch out for with this design. As I previously alluded to, the closer together the grid lines are, the denser this will be. The further apart they are, the fluffier this will be. But you got to make sure that you check your batting and make sure that your lines are not further apart than you can quilt, because otherwise you'll end up with bagging in between the lines and you don't want that. Now, if you're not bothered about your lines all intersecting in the right places, just go for your zigzags and not worry about it too much. But you can see in the video when I was doing the prep, I spent a bit of time making sure that the lines were coming together and they were intersecting at the right places, and that's what makes it look the way that it does. If you're not fussed for that, just do zigzag lines randomly and you'll get another kind of looking effect that's still really nice and still really effective as well. Use variegated thread for a really snazzy design. You can try some decorative stitches doing this. I'm not sure how it would turn out. I think depending on the stitch, it may detract slightly. So maybe a straight stitch or maybe a very thin zigzag would work on this. Something maybe to try out when you're playing with it. Use a thread that matches your background to get texture with this one, especially in negative space, as you'll see in my example quilts. Or use a thread that really pops out and then it will give you a really striking design across your quilt. So now let's look at those example quilts, and so you can see what this does in negative space, because I really do like how it turns out. Okay, so first up, our first example is our Winding Ways quilt. And I finally found a way to make this obvious so that you can actually see the quilting lines on top of the design, because I've mentioned before it's very difficult to get these lines to show up. This is just placed all over the quilt. I'm not accenting any parts of the block. I'm not drawing attention to anything. It's just literally placed on top as an all-over design, which adds lovely texture. So you can hopefully follow my mouse on screen. You can see that the pattern creates diamond shapes and then it creates squares on point, which I really like. It does sort of in places, highlight bits. You could spend a lot of time, if you were that way inclined, figuring this all out to make it line up perfectly so it framed each of these blocks. But I think it works nicely just as an overall design, because the Winding Ways block is fairly busy and you don't want to detract too much from the piecing. And I like how the Winding Ways is curved, but the crosshatch grid is very square and symmetrical, so it feels very nice, the two together. Our next example is my favorite carpenter star. By now you must know I love this design. Again, I've done this as an all over design. I'm not highlighting any parts. although it kind of has worked out that it has highlighted little bits of it. So let's just dissect this a touch. So you can see the squares on point are highlighting these little sections here. The diamond very nicely highlights the kind of pinwheel in the center at the start, and then the rest is just placed around, and it kind of highlights bits and it kind of doesn't highlight bits. I think this would be quick and easy to do, and I think the squareness and the blockiness of the carpenter star works very nicely with the crosshatch grid. Next example, using the circle design quilt. Again, I'm keeping these all as just all over designs because I'm trying to show you that these can be done quickly and without too much fuss. You can, of course, really sit and think this one out, and you could have it so that the intersections are in the middle of circles, and that would work very nicely. It would just take a little bit of extra planning to get the lines to land and intersect in the right places. So it's not totally impossible, but it does take a bit of thought. But again, I like how this is a modern quilt design with the circles. And so this feels like a modern, lovely, kind of angular, crisp design on top of the circle. So I love how this wobbly effect in the middle of this quilt that the pieces create. That's very nice. But so far these have all been square quilts. Let's just take a quick look at some rectangular shaped quilts just to show you how this works. So the first one I have for you is made using a Pennsylvania block from my Behind the Block season 1. Now you can see that this still works just as well. It takes a little bit more planning to get the lines in the right place, but it didn't take long at all. Again, this is done as an all-over design. I'm not highlighting or accenting, but again, you could. It almost feels like, I don't know if you're familiar with like crazy paving. It was like a very popular style of like garden path when I was a kid. So this kind of crazy paving idea all over this, I think it's really quite nice. And it fits in with the rectangular design easily. It just, as I say, takes a little bit of thought getting things in the right place. But once you're there, it's dead simple to do. And that actually is a very nice quilt design as well. I really like that, and I'm looking forward to making one of those in a future video. And then finally, I have a single Irish chain quilt for you. Again, this is a quilt design that I absolutely love, and I really like this one because I did spend a little bit of time planning this out. I'm not going to say that this is totally in-depth planned out so that it accents the design, but I have spent time making this work with the piecing. So what I wanted to do was to get some texture in the negative space. So again, you can follow my cursor on screen. The negative space is the background squares between the 9 patches. As you can see, I've tried to get each of these squares that are on point to land in these negative background squares. And then I've tried to keep the diamonds either on or in the 9 patches. So this one here is a really good example how it kind of goes from corner to corner of the 9 patch. And so I really like this because, again, it's got that crazy paving idea that I was just talking about in the previous example, but it's working with the piecing now to create some interest. And I would be tempted to come in and do some maybe, curved lines inside each of these squares, or just accent into that negative space a little bit with some other quilting design just to add a little bit more visual interest in there. But again, I really like how this has turned out, and it didn't take that much extra effort. I just had to kind of plan a single line at a time, looking where it was going to land, and was it going to land on the right spot, or did it need to adjust where I was starting? So once I got that down, it was absolutely fine. But again, I really, really like this one. And hopefully the lines are nice and clear for you to see, because I've just dialed down the opacity of the image of the quilt so that the lines show up a little bit clearer, but you can still see the piecing underneath. So I hope you like those. I hope you'll give them a try. I think they look really snazzy, and I'm going to be trying a few of these myself. So that was our Zigzag Crosshatch, one of my favorite designs. And I hope you'll agree that this is a lovely design that adds beautiful texture to your quilt and makes it feel very modern and very snazzy. In our next video, video number 14, we are starting now to compound on the skills that we've learned and combine different designs. So we'll be working on diamond reflections. Ooh. So that's lovely, and I hope you will look forward to that one. The reason that we are making all these samples though is we are making a flip book so that when we're working on a quilt project, we can get this book out, we can flick through it, and we can pick a design, and we know what it looks like, and we know what effort is involved, and we can get the project done and finished quickly without fuss or without worrying. because it's very easy to procrastinate because you can't come up with a design. So I'm trying to help you alleviate that problem with this video series. And there's also going to be a book that accompanies this video series that will have all of these 21 designs in it, plus another 9, and it'll be packed full of information, tips, example quilts, photographs, step-by-step instructions, and lots of other things that are really going to be helpful for you in your studio. So if you're interested in getting on the pre-order list for that, there is a link in the description below that you can sign up to, and you'll get notified when that's coming out. If you are sewing along, I would love for you to tag me on Instagram using the hashtag #ThisIsHowYouQuiltIt. And if you tag me, the Colourbound Quilter, I can follow your work and I can share it with everybody else so everybody can see all the beautiful things that you are making. And then finally, if this video was helpful, I would love if you would give it a thumbs up. And why not consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you get notified when the next video in this series comes out. So I hope you had fun with the Zigzag Crosshatch, and I hope you can't wait for the diamond reflections. And until next time, take care, and I'll see you soon.